In the mid-90s, the yuppie days of the 80s were over. Conspicuous consumption was certainly on the down low, and expensive sports cars were not the hot sellers. Porsche was in desperate financial trouble. This is the car that saved Porsche. At the Detroit Auto Show in 1993, Porsche unveiled a concept of a next-generation low-dollar sports car. Now, by Porsche standards, low dollar is not exactly Miata, but you know, for them, it was an introductory priced car. They introduced it as a concept, and fans went crazy. I mean, everybody's like, you have to build this car. This is an amazing car. That being said, by fans, I don't mean 911 fans. The traditional 911 lovers were not into the Boxster, and most still are not. It was not air-cooled, it was not rear-engined, it was not their thing. Personally, when I saw this car, I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. It's a 550 Spider, reincarnated for the new generation of modern times. I was like, I gotta have one of these cars. The car came out in '97. It was about at least $10,000 cheaper than a 911. And sales took off. There was only two things people didn't like about the Boxster. One was the power. It was a 2.5 liter, it was right around 200 horsepower, and people thought that wasn't enough. I mean, the car would go 0 to 60 in just under 7 seconds, so it was pretty quick, even by those standards. But people did not like what they thought was a lack of power, and they also thought the interior was a little chintzy for a Porsche. In 2000, Porsche fixed things. They upped the displacement from 2.5 to 2.7 liters. They gave it a little bit more horsepower, and they improved the interior. The big news in 2000 was the introduction of the Boxster S. The S had a 3.2 liter. It was 250 horsepower, had big brakes. It had a 6-speed transmission, a better suspension. They did a lot of upgrades, and that turned the Boxster from kind of what was often called a hairdresser sports car, which it wasn't, but that's what it was called, to a true supercar. At that point, it would rival a 911 and anything else sold at the time for performance and handling, and it's just a fantastic car. But that raised the price. At 50,000 bucks, that's real money, and it was a really great car, but not everybody could afford it. But let's fast forward 20 years to today. Today, this same great car is worth about $10,000 to $15,000. Most of these cars were bought by wealthy people. They were well cared for, they were toys, they were summer home cars, they were weekend cars. So there's a lot of nice, well-kept, low-mileage cars out there. There's one Achilles heel that this car has that has really helped keep the prices down, and that is the IMS bearing. If you're buying a Boxster, you either need to take a crapshoot and not deal with the IMS bearing issue, or spend a few $1,000s to fix it, or buy a car that's well maintained, has records, and has had the fix already done. The aftermarket for these cars is really good. Parts are available. Even Porsche themselves, through their Classic division, has recognized the 986 Boxster as a classic and has a full complement of parts available for these cars. So I've wanted one of these cars since they came out, and I've watched the prices steadily drop. The prices dropped to below $10,000 last year, and then they started to come back up. People started to realize you have a whole generation of people that are not 911 obsessed, they're just car obsessed, and they started to realize the sum of its parts and how great a Boxster is, and how many of them are out there, and how fun they are to drive. So prices started to go up last year, and we jumped on this car before we couldn't afford it again. What I like about this car, I mean, I've always liked the looks. I like the mid-engine configuration. The engine sounds so good. It is such a cool car to take on a curvy road, through the mountains, down along the beach. The top goes down, it's comfortable. The air conditioning blows cold. You pay no penalty to have a great car. It even gets good mileage. And actually, other than trunk space, although it does have a front trunk and a rear trunk, which most little sports cars don't, you could live with this car as a daily driver. It's plenty reliable enough and comfortable enough to drive every day. Another really cool thing about these cars is how fun they are on track. I'm gonna let JG Pasterjack, our official test driver, take this one out, get some numbers, and tell you just how cool it is.
So when your boss says, hey, take my Porsche to the racetrack and take a few laps, yeah, you typically want to say yes. So I'm excited to hop behind the wheel of this Boxster out here at the firm. Look, Porsche has a long history of track performance. They made their name in racing. So before I even get in the car, I know that this car is making some promises that hopefully it can fulfill. So I'm excited to get it out here on a racetrack, feel what it's like at below the limit of performance and over the limit of performance, because one of the hallmarks of Porsche performance over the years has been accessibility to a broad range of drivers. Yeah, they've had a few cars that have had kind of sketchy reputations, like the 911 turbos and the 930s back in the early days, but they've always had a very, very high and very broad performance envelope, and I'm hoping that the mid-engine Boxster continues that tradition. I have to admit, after the first couple of laps, I wasn't quite convinced, but after that, and I started to push the car a little bit harder, I realized that this is an amazing chassis, just an absolutely brilliant chassis with very much less than brilliant steering. And being somebody who drives a C5 Corvette normally on track, I completely get that vibe. It's a great chassis that's sort of hampered by not great steering. So once you get used to that, once you can put that out of your mind and you use the feedback coming through your hips and your inner ear and your shoulders and feel the car around you, and don't worry about what your hands are doing, and just be very delicate with the steering, boy, it's just amazing. You can just kind of do anything with this car. Brakes are fantastic. So whatever brake pads Tim has put on here are fantastic, and they're augmenting an already fantastic brake system. But the chassis is just brilliant. I mean, you can place the car right where you want. It feels a little bit like driving a very, very good sim race game. Like it feels like the best cars in iRacing, where you're never gonna have that perfect feedback through the steering wheel. The steering is just a little bit too light, it's a little bit too indirect, but the things it's making the car do are just absolutely wonderful, and it's a lot of fun. If there was, I'm not even gonna fault it for the lack of steering feedback or the lightness of the steering. It's just something you get used to. If there was a way to increase steering feel, great. If not, you know what, get used to it. The seats are probably great road seats, but they're definitely not up to the level of the chassis of this car. In fact, I found myself sort of shuffle steering so I could keep my elbow planted against this door over here to hold myself up, because you're sliding around a lot. But that's not a knock against the seats. That's really more indicative of just how much grip this car can produce and how much it's throwing you around. So if you're going to track a Boxster regularly, you definitely want to look into some seats with some more grip. But yeah, really just an absolutely brilliant chassis with a few small faults, but that don't really hurt your enjoyment of the car once you get used to that. You know, there are going to be faster cars that you can buy for the same money that will lay down a faster, an empirically faster lap on our official test course here at the firm, but they're not Porsches. You could probably go buy a Honda Civic Type R, and it's a cool car. It's great, but is it going to appreciate the way this probably will? There's no Porsche that doesn't eventually bottom out and start appreciating eventually. So you almost have to look at any Porsche as an investment a little bit. So bang for the buck wise, where does it sit? It's a very complicated question because of this badge right here in the center of the steering wheel. This badge makes a lot of promises, both from performance, which it absolutely lives up to, and from just sort of a emotionally centering in the market. And there's always a lot of argument. Is a Boxster a real Porsche? It's mid-engine, it isn't rear engine. It's a fantastic handling, driver-friendly car that you can go to a track day and drive on track. So yeah, at the price point, you're not going to be disappointed with it. You're certainly going to be very, very happy with driving this on track, because it is a very low stress way to get on track and feel confident and feel fast, and it's probably going to appreciate. So it's a more complex question than that, because you almost have to look at it as an investment, knowing that this is a car that has a lot of history behind it.
Support brands that support classic motorsports. Get your chemical solutions from CRC Industries. Visit crcindustries.com to learn more.